นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings. We've come together on the occasion of Asalaha Puja. So one of the important days in the Buddhist calendar. It's an occasion to remember the first teaching the Buddha gave, where he quite simply and directly laid out what he'd understood from his own enlightenment experience a couple of months previously. He went to visit his old friends, the 5 ascetics, living in the deer park in Benares, and once they got over the shock of seeing him, they offered him a seat, and he gave some teachings explaining the Four Noble Truths, the path to liberation from suffering, which is what he had been, or he was motivated in his own personal quest for liberation, seeing that there is suffering in life. At the very least, we all have to experience aging, sickness and death. Anyone born in the world has to experience those things. And in between, a fair amount of other kinds of suffering as well. So, physical pain, mental pain, anguish, disappointments, or as we just chanted, in brief, not attaining one's wishes in life is suffering. And if you watch closely, every day of your life there'll be some wishes you don't get fulfilled. So the Buddha, through his own observation and insight, recognized that there was dukkha or suffering, stress, unsatisfactoriness in his own life that led him to out into the forest to study with the leading meditation masters of the day, but then realizing that they hadn't fully comprehended suffering and experienced the cessation of suffering. They weren't yet what we would say fully awakened or fully enlightened. He went off on his own to finish the job, and on the night of his own enlightenment he did finish the job. And out of compassion he came back to teach his friends what he had learnt, lay it out for them. And for our because of our good fortune, Venerable Kondanya attained the first level of enlightenment listening to that talk. Became a stream winner, Sotapanna. And they say through the simple reflection, the understanding that all conditioned things that arise from causes and conditions must cease. Whatever arises from a cause must cease, whether you're talking about physical conditions or mental conditions. Nothing lasts in the conditioned world. We say that this world is a conditioned thing. So somebody is born through causes and conditions, and they have parents. But once you're born, you don't live forever. You gradually mature, you age, and at some point you die. So where there's birth, there's death. Or any mental state that you experience as a human being. Pleasant, unpleasant, or just neutral. It has a beginning, it has an end. It rises, passes away. Feelings are the same. The Buddha observed that feeling, pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, arises based on sense contact. So having been born as human beings, we have senses, we have eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and a body. And then we have the mind, the sixth sense. They all experience objects from moment to moment, depending where your attention is. You're seeing, you're hearing, you're feeling with your skin, say. You'll have sense contact, gives rise to pleasant or unpleasant feeling or neutral feeling. But it's through causes and conditions that feeling arises. And it's there for a while and then it passes away again. So as a human being, the Buddha divided our experience up into 5 groups of experience. The body, feelings, perceptions, the way we remember things, thought formations, mental states, and sense consciousness. So normally we're just seeing ourselves as a human being as just one thing. Me, myself. And we quite automatically, unknowingly identify with this body and feelings, perceptions, thoughts and sense consciousness as a self, as me, mine, myself. And that's where we experience suffering, because these 5, what we call 5 khandhas, or 5 groups of experience, are conditioned. They arise and pass away due to causes and conditions. Even though we say me, mine, myself, we can't really own them, control them, make them be the way we want. So coming back to the body, we can't make this body stay young, or look the way we want all the time, or feel the way we want, because it's conditioned. So it's getting older, and with that, the way we look, the way we feel changes. So the Buddha summarized suffering in this way. In brief, these 5 groups of experience, the 5 khandhas, are suffering. They're the basis for attachment, and then we suffer. Wherever there's ignorance of the truth, we don't understand the truth, then craving, or we say unwise desire, arises, which causes attachment to these khandhas, and we suffer. And what the Buddha pointed out, as he explained the Dhamma partly on that first night, he taught the Dhammacakka Sutta, but then later throughout his life teaching in northern India, he just kept explaining from different angles, different points of view, different aspects of this simple process of the way human beings experience stress, suffering, and dissatisfaction all the time through their lives. It's inevitable as long as the mind doesn't see the truth and is caught into craving and attachment. is just the way it is. Whether we like it or not, whether we agree or not, whether you recognize it or not, that's just going on all the time. But what the Buddha also understood on the night of his enlightenment, and then came and explained to the 5 ascetics, is that there is also a way out of suffering. By developing this noble eightfold path, again, what we just chanted, by cultivating that completely, fully, it's inevitable that a human being will go beyond suffering and become liberated from all forms of mental and physical suffering. Again, that's just the way it is, whether you realize it or not, whether you agree or not. He said it's just a natural law of things. If you cultivate the 8 factors of the Noble Path, you'll reach the end of suffering. It's inevitable. It's for sure. And everyone would like to be sure that they can get beyond suffering. Well, that's what the Buddha gave to the world as a gift, is a pathway to the end of suffering. He said it's for sure, if you follow this path, you cultivate these qualities, you will reach the end of all stress and suffering. But obviously, the task is to follow the path, to do it, to complete it. But at least we have a path, so that's the hope, that's the good news, the positive side of his teaching, is that there is a way out of suffering. It's never hopeless, it's never a fixed destiny that you have to suffer forever and ever, which is often how we feel, and that's a delusion. In fact, there is a way out of suffering available, but we have to follow that path, cultivate it. So that's, in summary, in brief, what he discovered for himself through his own awakening, and then that's what he passed on to the 5 ascetics. There is suffering, and it's to be fully comprehended and understood. It has its cause, ignorance, craving, attachment, but it has its ending. There is the cessation of suffering, and that's to be realized. And then there's the path of practice, the eightfold noble path, which will bring a human being to the end of suffering. Sometimes people compare the Buddha to a doctor, and they say, he taught in a very logical and a very structured way. There is just as a doctor will say, well, there's this disease or pain or injury this person has. It has its symptoms, but then it has its cause. If we can identify the cause, then we can apply a remedy and they can be cured. But of course, some illnesses are beyond cure. So even if a doctor can identify what it is, he can't always give you the cure. But the Buddha gave you a cure that is certain, so even better than any doctor. And the certainty is, if you follow this path, you complete it, you will definitely be free from suffering. So you must say, this is the best gift a human being can have, to hear these teachings, come in contact with the Buddha, or an awakened disciple of the Buddha who can pass on the teachings. So for Venerable Kalyano on that occasion, he listened, reflected on the teachings, and all the qualities were ready for him personally. He'd already meditated a lot. He had great patience and endurance. He already had a certain level of morality in his conduct. he was already wise to a certain extent, and so just hearing one talk, he had his enlightenment experience. So everything was ready for him. And the one way they describe, rising of insight, wisdom or knowledge, vision, as we said, it's light. Like the mind lights up with wisdom. Wisdom is like a light dispelling the darkness of the night. Like tonight we have lights around the hall, and in a moment we'll walk in a circumambulation around the hall holding candles, and they'll dispel the darkness of the night, or at least a little bit. Well, wisdom is like that. It dispels the darkness of wrong views and our delusions and our attachments, which are like a kind of a darkness covering our mind. So hearing the Dhamma is like a little spark of light, reflecting on it inwardly, and then cultivating these qualities of the path. The light of wisdom arises and dispels the darkness of delusion. So the Buddha identified for human beings that we have this problem, this cause of suffering is that we have a sense of self that forms in our thinking, the way we view things, the way we look at life. We view it from a point of view, there is this self, there's me. And one way that manifests is that we have a sense of me. I can do things, I can choose to do things, I make decisions, I think, and therefore I am. I can speak, I can do things based on identifying this with this body as a self, and then our thoughts, feelings, perceptions. So he said the way out of this delusion is to investigate it, to look closely at what's going on. So much of this Buddhist path, this eightfold noble path, is bringing you to the point where you can see clearly the way things are. So partly that involves just calming yourself down enough so you can look more closely. Because one of the things that happens is because we have this sense of self and we attach to the body, the feelings, we're always reacting to things. It's very agitating if you identify with this body as a self, you grasp at it. If you have pleasure arising in the body, you grasp at that. It agitates you one way. If you have pain, it agitates you another way. That's why we're always moving around through the day. It's painful staying in one position all the time. So where there's pain, we tend to seek more pleasure by changing posture and seeking distractions and trying to get more control of our world so that we can minimize the pain and maximize the pleasure, based on the understanding that there's a me in control who wants this and can experience things. And as long as we can pursue pleasure and a certain amount of control in our life, well, that tends to be what we do, isn't it? We go out to work every day to earn money so that we can have more comfort, convenience, get more things, find ways to increase our pleasure, our material happiness. And we are often running away from painful, unpleasant experiences. But we're always being disappointed because we can't absolutely control our world. Very difficult, isn't it? We are constantly in the world experiencing things beyond our control.
sometimes very powerful kind of experiences like natural disasters and serious injuries and accidents and things. More often it's just small things. You can't really control. You're just the next moment, how you're going to feel a few moments from now. Whether you'll feel comfortable, at ease, or you'll start to have a pain in your leg. You'll feel hot, cold. Your mental state may change. You may be feeling quite interested in what you're doing, and then a few moments later you feel bored or restless, or a memory pops into your mind and you start to feel sad. The more you investigate, you realize we actually have not that much control of this body and mind at all. We don't have much control of other people, even though we call people our family, our parents, our children, our friends, our fellow countrymen, whatever. We have very little control over other people and not that much control over ourselves, and yet we're constantly pursuing that. We all want more control so that we can get more of what we want and minimize what we don't want. But as the Buddha pointed out, we always keep returning to this experience. We're not always getting our wishes fulfilled. We have to spend time with what we don't like, and we're often separated from what we do like. And that's part and parcel of being a human being. That's what we call craving. And craving is overcome or abandoned through knowledge. So the Buddhist path is about developing knowledge, insight into the nature of our suffering and seeing how it comes through craving, which hardens and solidifies into attachment, just habits of physical and mental behavior, which build up this sense of self, which reinforce more craving, and it's a cyclical thing. And on it goes until we die, through the end of our life. Whereas the Dhamma, cultivating this path, is doing the same thing in reverse, is one way you could describe it. So where there's craving coming from ignorance, leading to attachment, leading to suffering, we bring up the opposite. We bring up mindfulness. We bring up clarity, clear comprehension, wisdom, insight into the nature of things. And that has the opposite effect. It reduces attachment or sees through attachment, helps us to see through it, abandon craving, replace ignorance with knowledge and understanding. And the experience of suffering starts to fade. So where can we practice that? Well, through meditation. It's probably the most direct, simplest way for us to experience that. And we can do that quite quickly too. Maybe already tonight you've experienced it a bit, meditating, when you have a few moments where your mind is centered on your meditation object. Say if it's the breath. When you have mindfulness, at that moment craving can't slip into the mind, can it? Because mindfulness is like the opposite of craving. Is when mindfulness is established, you're aware, but you're not giving into any kind of desire for or against your experience. You're just knowing the breath, and if other experiences impinge on the mind, if your mindfulness is strong, you just know them and let them go. So you'll notice when you're mindful, you start to feel peaceful. If only a little bit, if only for a few moments of mindfulness, you feel a little bit better because you're not following craving. And the moment you start following craving, inevitably attachment forms, and then what we call bhava, becoming. You become a certain way. It reinforces different feelings and experiences and thoughts, and your whole outlook is, with a sense of self, is reinforced. And you end up suffering. Sometimes just small little bits of suffering, sometimes very deep, profound suffering. But the way of mindfulness, clarity, wisdom, it's the opposite. It's reducing that process. So you start to feel better. You start to feel more peaceful, at ease within yourself. Even if you still have impingement like you may still have some physical ailments, or you feel tired, or there's other things going on around you in the world that are not pleasant. But if you establish mindfulness in your mind, craving is not forming, attachment's not forming, becoming and suffering is not forming. And that's just a simple law of nature. They're opposites. Mindfulness and wisdom are the opposite of craving. So when mindfulness and wisdom is there, craving is not there. So if you have many moments of mindfulness, watching the breath go in, breath go out, mindful, clearly comprehending, craving can't form, you start to feel good. Physically you relax, settle down. Mentally your mind starts to feel more at ease. You have a sense of well-being arise. And you get these different aspects of the happy mind, the peaceful mind arising. So we call rapture, joy, contentment, happiness, and singleness of mind. You know, one of the attributes, characteristics of suffering is the mind is all over the place. And we say that, don't we? When we're suffering, we say, oh, my mind is all over the place. I can't stop thinking, worrying, anxious, thinking too much. Suffering is like that. Mind is all over the place. Many moods, thoughts coming up fast, different feelings. Whereas when you bring up mindfulness, and your mindfulness is continuous for a while, you start to experience unification of mind, singleness of mind, stillness. Because all you're knowing is the breath. So you could say craving can't get a look in at that moment. So you feel good. Yeah, it's like some difficult person can't get in your door, or some unpleasant experience you've had before can't happen because you're right there with mindfulness. And this is important, that we experience some of this inner well-being, peace and happiness, why it's worthwhile investing time in practicing meditation. Because it gives you very direct insight into the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha was talking about. And you can do that right here, right now, today, now. It's not something you have to go on a course next year to do and find out about. If you are willing to practice mindfulness right here, right now, tonight, on this night, Asalaha Puja, you can already get an insight into the Four Noble Truths that the Buddha was pointing to. It does require some effort, and that's why one factor in the path is what we call right effort. In the effort to bring up mindfulness, abandon craving, unwholesome mental states rooted in greed, anger, delusion, and cultivate the path, wholesome mental states rooted in wisdom, mindfulness, kindness, compassion, and so on. Takes some effort, but you can do that. Human beings can do that, and the Buddha said he wouldn't have taught Kondanya and the other ascetics, and later on all the other people that he taught through his life, if human beings couldn't do this. And the Buddha himself was a human being, an extraordinary one, but still a human being with a body and a mind like us. But he's willing to go the distance as far as practicing and developing insight into the truth. And then he's willing to go the distance in teaching people as well. So human beings can do this, we can do this, the Buddha did it, I can do it, you can do it. And it's quite possible to practice meditation, develop some mindfulness, develop some insight into the Four Noble Truths, and see that craving is impermanent. It's not self, it's not really you as a person, it's not a being, a person, it's just a mental state arising out of ignorance that can be seen, known, and abandoned. The cynics will say, well, it will come back again, what's the point? But if you keep abandoning it often enough, you're undermining its ability, its power to come back and overwhelm your mind again. So it gets weaker. And the opposite qualities, the qualities of the path, get stronger through practice, through training, through exercise. This is why when we come into the Vasana, the range retreat, it's a good time to practice. Say for 3 months, I'm going to meditate every day. Practice improving your ability to mindfully pay attention to the breath, mindfully develop insight, contemplate, observe the truth of impermanence in your experience of these 5 khandhas, 5 groups. Notice from start to finish for the next 90 days of the 3-month retreat. Notice changes in your body. Maybe you'll be healthy, but maybe you'll get some illness within the 3 months, and maybe the illness will pass away, or you experience some discomfort, if only the discomfort of feeling tired from time to time, or sitting with pain in your legs, or whatever it may be. You'll notice that, and you'll see the changes in your body and the aging of the body and the feelings of hunger and thirst, and then eating and then feeling full, feeling hot and cold. This is where you can study through the next 90 days, establish mindfulness and observe different phenomena arising and ceasing, just like Venerable Kondanya did. Rupang Anichang, as we chant every morning. Form is impermanent. This body is impermanent. Vedana Anicca, feeling is impermanent. Sanya Anicca, perception, memory is impermanent. We all know what it's like to forget things. We all know what it's like to be tricked by memory, and you remember something but then you realize you remembered it wrongly. Over time your memory changes because you keep remembering things that you remembered before, and little by little your memory kind of changes over time, so it can become very inaccurate, or nothing like what your original memory was. Thought formation is constantly changing. I mean, your thoughts, your mental states, sometimes wholesome and skillful and good, sometimes unskillful, constantly changing. And we tell each other, today I feel good, today I feel bad. That's an area to observe and investigate your changing mental states. They arise, they pass away. And every time you do that, you're getting an insight into the Four Noble Truths. And you're realizing that there's a lot of things you can't control because they go according to causes and conditions. So then wisdom that comes up says, well, don't try and control things you can't control. Let go of that desire to control. And that doesn't mean to say you give up on life and stop trying to do anything. But this is a letting go of a wrong view of life, of who you think you are, what you think life is like. You're letting go of the wrong view that says, I should be able to control things and make it go according to my desires. Because you can't. And as mindfulness and wisdom mature, your mind can accept that more. I can let go. And maybe as you practice, you realize if you get ill, you just have to accept it. Oh, it's not what I want, but it's happened. It's like this, it feels like this. or relationships with other people. Sometimes they go well, sometimes not. Sometimes they talk well with you, sometimes they talk badly. Sometimes they like you, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they ignore you, sometimes they're all over you. But it's beyond control, isn't it? Other people, very difficult to control. At this time everyone's noticing you can't control the weather. You get floods and you get droughts. You can't control the economy, especially the world economy. Now everything is interlinked, one country with another, global trade, and you get one ripple over there and it affects us over here. So the prices of things going up all the time, wages not going up in matching the prices, so everyone's feeling the pinch, not enough money. It's out of our control, isn't it? You can't really control much. Even if you had all the money in the world, you're a billionaire, the price of your property and your assets and your stocks and shares and the price of money changes, and you can't control that either. Up and down it goes. So when you have insight into that, that's insight into the Four Noble Truths. Let go of that identification with the desire to control, to own, to have, following on from ignorance, conditioning, craving. And what happens when you let go is not that you struggle and you go to some place of desperation, like your mind probably tries to convince you when you're meditating. The mind comes up with all its excuses why you shouldn't let go of anger and fear and worry. It says, hold on to things, you need all this stuff. You need to think about it and hold on to it. But if you're willing to try, follow the Buddha, establish mindfulness and let go, maybe it takes your mind to a higher level, a better place, a place of letting go, liberation, freedom, peace, stillness. There's nothing to be lost in at least trying it. Sometimes, people like to praise people who are heroic and do things out in the world, and that can be good as well, helping each other, or people who are pushing the boundaries, developing new techniques, new knowledges, new this, new that. It can be good as well, but if you follow the Buddha's teaching, the real heroism of life and the real things that have real value to us as human beings are insight, changing the mind on the inside. And that's something other people may never really realize, unless they've done it themselves perhaps. Having enough mindfulness to let go of a moment of control where you're afraid of something, so you want to try and control it, and get rid of something you don't like, so it brings up anger, fear, aversion, anxiety. Or when you have strong greed to control, to have something, but giving that up because you're mindful enough to see it suffering. That's the real challenge of life, and that's where we need courage. And then we get that from faith in the Buddha, and then some wise reflection, seeing the suffering of life and seeing the value of pursuing this path to get out of suffering. Then it gives you a certain courage to try. And you try letting go. So letting go of everything except for, say, the object of your mindfulness. If you're following the breath, use that. So you let go of everything else and just stick with the breath. And your mind can go to a much deeper, more profound kind of happiness. And it gives you a platform, a foundation where you can refer back to all your other experience in life and find, all those other things are not as good as this. If you pursue meditation, you'll experience more peace, more happiness, and that gives you a confidence that what the Buddha was teaching is probably true. You may not be fully enlightened yet, but you're already experiencing something better than you had before, a bit of peace that comes from letting go, less worries, less fears, less anger, less doubt, less obsessive desire. It brings you happiness, and that gives you something to compare with the rest of life. It's a happiness that's better than all those things that just arise and pass away and cause you confusion and suffering. That's what Venerable Kalyano experienced. He realized, seeing the impermanent nature of things leads you to let go, brightens your mind, makes your mind happier. So he became absolutely confident and convinced that what the Buddha taught is true, and no more doubts. These are the qualities of a Sotapanna. No more doubt, skepticism, no more kind of blindly fumbling around at the practice, knowing how to practice, why, how to use the practice for the end of developing true insight. And no more attachment to the view of self. So there's no more interpreting his experience as a person, me, mine, myself, who you have to control and protect and fear for and worry about and suffer with. Once that's gone, a lot of suffering just drops away. Wasn't completely enlightened, but he had a glimpse of Nibbana. So there's no more doubts about Nibbana. So we're celebrating that tonight. In a moment we'll do our circumambulation, but for the moment I'll leave you with these words for your reflection.